feel honoured to be hosting VMA Group's first ever podcast. I'm excited to be joined by an exceptional communicator in Sarah Arthur. How are you doing today, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Good to be here.
Good. Well, I'm glad you can join us. I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. I have to be honest, I currently feel, and unfortunately look like a young Chris Evans, but other than that, I'm very well. To introduce myself to our lovely audience, my name is Matt Gibbs. I manage contract roles here at VMA Group with a particular focus on internal and change communications. I work on roles from officer to director level, covering all sectors across both corporate and consumer businesses. Since everything's happened in the economy over the last few months with the government furlough scheme and job losses, I've had a huge amount of people come to me looking to explore the interim market, many of whom haven't contracted before. So I guess the main objective of today's podcast is to share insights, hints and tips from a seasoned interim. Sorry, Sarah, I used that word in the nicest way possible. So Sarah will be able to explain to anybody considering contracting for the first time, well, all about the wonderful world of interim, just what it's like and what she's gained from it over the last few years. So Sarah, without further ado, would you be able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your recent career?
Yeah, certainly. I'm very happy to be called a seasoned interim. It's hopefully that's what I am. And thank you for inviting me to do the podcast with you guys. That's really nice, and I do enjoy being able to do things like this. Yeah, so my name's Sarah Arthur, and I've been a contractor for about four and a half years, coming up 4.5 years. And touch wood, very good choice that I made. And it's all been going very, very well for the last 4.5 years. I started my career in sort of more of a marketing role. Very excitingly, I joined Virgin Mobile when Richard Branson launched it in 1999. And I started in marketing, but over a period of time, I transitioned into communications, internal comms, and kind of found my place and decided that I love working in communications, which really is like marketing to your own people. And that's the career I then followed. And have now worked probably for about 18 years in internal comms for a number of sectors. I was lucky enough to live overseas for a few years, and so I took a bit of a break. But when I came back in 2010, I worked for Virgin Media. So I have a bit of a history with the Virgin brand. And so my last permanent role was 6 years with Virgin Media as their head of internal comms and engagement, which was a fantastic time, and then decided to let go of Virgin, and 4.5 years ago decided to go into contracting. So yeah, that's my background.
Amazing. So it sounds like, obviously a very successful career over the past 18 years, many of which were in a permanent capacity over at Virgin and other businesses. What was it that made you initially make that move into interim?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very big decision. Certainly, as a quite something that you have to give an awful lot of thought to, which I did. And actually, VMA played a bit of a part in that. As in, when I was sort of doing my due diligence and research and considering what being a contractor meant, I came and spoke at length to VMA, interestingly, those years ago. But for me, I loved my time at Virgin, but I felt personally that I had achieved a lot at Virgin. I had gone through a number of very interesting projects, changes in the business, worked with different teams. And I just really felt ready for a change and really kind of wanted to do something new, wanted to work within a new business or a new sector or a new company. But what I didn't want to do is take the leap into the next permanent role. And I started considering contracting as a way to, at that time, look for my next permanent role. And the more I looked into it, the more I thought actually becoming a sort of professional or career contractor, as I call it, would really work for me. And I took that step, and it's been one I absolutely do not regret.
Well, I'm glad we were able to advise, and I'm glad you haven't looked back since that moment, 4 or so years ago. In that time, of course, you've worked in different businesses, you worked on different projects, maybe 6 or 7 now over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give us a bit of information about, your favourite contract in that time and what was it about that you most enjoyed?
Yeah, do you know, I was thinking about this the other day, because when I sometimes talk to people about being a contractor and they ask me sort of similar things, and, I think I'd go first and last, which I'm sure is the name of a piece on Radio 2 or something, first and last.
Love it.
It was actually my second contract, Camelot, which was definitely up there as one of my favourites. And then probably the one that I'm coming to an end with at the moment. Actually, I've been a year now at Nespresso, but Camelot I loved because I joined them for about 5 months. They were at a very, very interesting time. They run the national lottery. They were facing into a very new world, a digital world, which was very different to the traditional national lottery. So to join a business at a big period of change, but I joined to run their huge annual event, which was going to be very pivotal in taking their people on the journey to this kind of like new world. So it was a really exciting first contract to do, and a great company and great people. So that really kind of inspired me to keep going with contracting. And then Nespresso, the one that I'm bringing to an end at the moment, has probably been also one of my favourite because it's a very special brand, but also I've gone through COVID with them, so I'm not going to go through that with another company, I don't think. So yeah, those two are my favourite.
Fingers crossed, at least you won't have to go through COVID any longer.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed indeed. I do feel a little bit insulted that I've placed you in 2 contracts and neither of which were mentioned, but we'll put that aside.
I thought you placed me in Camelot, Matt. Or BMA, wasn't it?
BMA, not personally, but no,
yeah.
all good. And people go into contracting for different reasons, whether it be financial, whether it be work-life balance, or working on projects, whatever it may be. What is it that you enjoy the most about it, rather than just pure favourite contract? What is it about the kind of way of life that you like most?
Well, I think it probably goes without saying that it is a way of life, and on a personal level. Very simply, what I love about it is, and we were talking about this, earlier, is that I can throw myself into something, give it all my energy and enthusiasm. I'm very passionate about what I do. But what it also means is that when I come to an end of a contract, I can choose to either roll into another contract if it presents itself, or I can take a chunk of time off. And that really is a lifestyle choice where, whether that's to travel more, which I love, or to just spend more time with family and friends in normal world, I feel is a very blessed situation. So I love it for that reason. But from the point of view of being, what I love about being in a contract and contracting is, I think it's like, I get to go in to a new company, a new sector. And someone said to me the other day, you make a career out of being the new person at a company, which a lot of people don't like. And I'm like, I love it, because you have to go in, you have to get under the skin of the company very, very quickly. I think you have to make relationships very, very quickly, and understand who are the people that are going to help you do your job to the best of your ability. And I think that really stimulates me, and that really excites me, that I'm kind of learning a new product, brand, sector every time, and meeting new people, and being given a new challenge to find a solution for. And that really works for me and my personality.
I love that you're not daunted by being the newbie consistently from one contract to the next. So it's very exciting.
Yeah,
not want to sound too much like a job interview, but what would you say would be your biggest achievement in your contracting career?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, that's like it. Yeah. Okay, this is sort of like, what does my CV say? Do you know what? I tell you what, you've just said to me, Matt, that I didn't comment on a role that you placed me in, but now I will, because I would say that my biggest achievement was probably my year at Marsh. So actually, as you know, Marsh are a huge insurance broker and risk management, global organisation, and I went in and did a year's contract with them to really oversee internal communications and change comms for a merger and acquisition. And I find M&A quite fascinating. But the achievement was I worked alongside the director of comms, and I have never, ever, ever known an organisation to try and do so much within the space of a year. So they, Marsh acquired 2 smaller insurance companies and merged them together to be their sort of SME model in the market. But as a company, they did everything from a rebrand to a systems integration to an HR transfer contractually. Every single work stream you could think of, they tried to do in the space of a year. And I'm immensely proud of being part of that and kind of steering the comms ship through that and making sure that, we had a really strong comms team in place for the future of that kind of merged organization. So it tested me to my limits, but it was definitely probably my biggest achievement.
Brilliant, and I know that the comms director there only had good things to say throughout your time there, and when you finished as well. So
that's good to know.
and I'm sure there's been lots of ups and potential some downs over the last 4 years. But what may be the thing that may have surprised you most about contracting that you may not have been expecting so much?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. What has surprised me? I think, I think, I don't know if this is probably more what I feel I've had to adjust to and I'm mindful of more than surprised me. But I think it would be very easy as a contractor to think you go in and people say to me, oh, it's great because, you sit outside of any of the sort of political arena and, in the thick of that sort of daily world of organizations. And actually, I often say that's not true. And I think maybe it's my own character and personality. But I would say to other contractors out there, you actually have to realize that even if you go in for a 3-month contract or a year contract, you can get very, very, very invested. And that's what makes it often bittersweet to walk away. You do feel a level of responsibility on your shoulders that a permanent person would, possibly more so because you're in there to deliver something very specific. So you become very embedded, you become very invested, which can be a great thing. But I didn't necessarily expect that. So yeah.
Well, I think that's credit to yourself that you do get so invested within a contract in an organisation rather than just coming in and kind of being so distant. So that's definitely credit to yourself there.
Yeah.
Lots of people listening will be interested just to maybe see the differences of working interim and in that interim capacity. I know you touched on the fact that some people may feel it maybe a little bit distant from the comms team or whatever it may be. How would you say that the role in general would differ as an interim compared to a permanent employee, do you think?
Yeah, and it does differ. It's interesting that there are lots of things that are very similar. And like I've just said, in some ways I go in and I forget myself sometimes that I'm interim, and I think my colleagues forget as well. But I think one of the things I think is different as a contractor is that you really have to go in and hit the ground running and prove yourself quickly. And you have to make very bold decisions, I think, and be quite bold in your approach. And I say that because as a permanent employee, you start at a new company, you want to hit the ground running, you want to make an impact. Yes, that's the same. But I think possibly, there's not a beginning, a middle and end. You're going on board as a permanent person, whereas as a contractor or interim, you've usually got a challenge that you've been asked to come up with a solution for, or a particular project that you have to oversee, or and I think what you have to do is you have to get the lay of the land super quickly. You have to be quite confident and make decisions with conviction because people are looking at you to bring in that layer that is not there in the permanent structure. But I think what that also means is I found as a contractor, I can be a little bit more bold in what I say, the counsel I give to senior leaders, the way I approach things, than I would possibly be as a permanent person, because there's an end point and you're not thinking about your future career. You just want to do the best job for that company. And 9 times out of 10, that approach has worked very well for me and kind of it gets you to a place you want to be quicker.
I'm not sure I'd like to be a fly on the wall at the 1 time out of 10, which maybe doesn't go down too well. But at least you got a good hit rate.
I styled that out. It's fine.
And you mentioned that your current contract is one that you've particularly enjoyed over the last 4 years now. And you also touched on COVID. You were initially introduced to do a totally different project. It wasn't linked to COVID at all. What was it that you initially brought it to do? Would you mind explaining a little bit more?
Yeah, Nespresso is interesting. So Nespresso, which is part of Nestle, which I'm going to be very honest about, I didn't know myself when I took on the role. But so they're part of it, huge global organization. But yeah, Nespresso are an incredible brand. And I was brought on because they have grown so rapidly over the last sort of few years in the UK and Ireland, well, globally, but in the UK and Ireland, fast growth. But they've never had a dedicated internal communications function or expertise in the business. So I was brought on to, set the framework for an internal communications function, and understand what that looks like and the channels, and then also to set a bit of a strategy to launch and embed the culture. I say culture program, but a culture isn't a program. It's an ongoing evolution. But they had worked really closely with an amazing agency to come up with a culture based on consultation with their people. So that was my original plan. And what they also wanted to do was prove the model. The HR director wanted to prove the model of having an internal communications function in the business, which we have done. But yes, the job that I went in to do hasn't quite been the journey with Nespresso I thought it would be, because H1 this year has been primarily COVID and navigating that. But yes, that's why I originally joined, and a year later, I'm still there, but just coming to an end with them.
That does sound fascinating. And I will say that lots of people over the years have come to me and say, look, if you ever get a job on, that enables me to go into a business and really develop and create a new internal comms function, then that's exactly the kind of thing I want. So I think you've had lots of people's dream job over the past 12 months, obviously impacted by COVID, but that sounds really, really interesting. Now, on the flip side of things, from a kind of hiring perspective, what would you advise, to companies or hiring managers considering hiring in interim? What should they be looking for in somebody?
Yeah, that's when I look at it. So it's interesting when one of the things I often think about as a contractor is that obviously I was a permanent person at Virgin Media for 6 years before becoming contracting. So I was in the client fixed for a number of years. So when I used to work with contractors, I think about the same thing in answer to this question, in that I think what's really, really important is that companies are very clear about the role of the contractor and what it is they're bringing them in to do, and where they sit in the structure of that organisation. And I'm not going to mention a name here, but at a certain point in my career, I went in to do a particular contract, and it was very challenging. It was a successful contract, and I enjoyed it, and it was great. But actually, unlike the other contracts I've done, I don't think the company that brought me in were absolutely clear about what is it that we're bringing this person in to do. Where do they sit within the structure, even the reporting lines? What autonomy are we going to give them to do what we think we need them to do? So I think companies need to kind of answer those questions themselves first, and be clear about the role of the contractor to set the contractor up for success. Otherwise, it can be quite difficult, or I'd say time wasted for the contractor trying to navigate that if there isn't clarity.
No, brilliant advice. Thank you for that. Now, again, we've touched on COVID-19 a little bit, maybe opening up a can of worms, because I know that, the communications capacity on the back of this is endless. But from an interim perspective, just trying to focus on this, what skills do you think interim communicators will need to develop, or kind of focus on post-COVID-19? Do you think much would have changed from that perspective at all?
Yeah, I do. It is a difficult one to answer, because I sort of think, I'm spent the last sort of 4 or 5 months, working through COVID with an organisation, and again, it's been up there with probably some of the most challenging months of my career, and also it's a hard one to answer, because yes, people say we're out of that initial crisis period, but no, the only thing that's certain is change in the future. No one quite knows what the future looks like. It's still a journey to go on, but I think it is absolutely inevitable that as communications professionals, whether you're permanent or interim, actually in this case, I think it's companies are having to really sort of pivot in their direction. What's the new normal for them? They're having to reset their purpose, reset their strategies. So I think communications are going to play a massive role in supporting companies in really a new way and a more significant way, which is brilliant for the comms industry, and going to have to play a huge part in taking colleagues on that journey. And then to be able to do that, I think one of the things we're going to have to do as comms professionals is to be very close to like innovation, to think outside of the box. If we're going to stay in a virtual world, what does that mean? Most of us are either involved in at the moment, are going to be probably running experiential virtual conferences, which is a very, very different skill set to running physical venue conferences. So how we kind of move into that world and do that, I think, is going to be on the shoulders of communications people and communications and engagement, because I think it's no longer just about being an internal or a change communications professional. We're also, instrumental in engaging the workforce and working with the relevant internal teams like the people teams to do that.
It will be very interesting to see how companies adapt and how the profession really changes in the coming in the coming years as well on the back of this. And something else which is shaking up the interim market dramatically and has done over the past year or so, is changes to the government's IR35 legislation. So just interested to hear your kind of take on this. I know, again, it's a large topic in the interim market, but what was your initial reaction to the government announcing the delay in the IR35 legislation changes earlier this year?
Relief. I was very pleased. I think, pre-COVID, and we were all going down a road of being ready for it to sort of change in April this year. So, we had to get our head around what that meant and make certain decisions as contractors. But to be honest, as COVID started in March, I remember thinking at the time, oh my goodness, I'm about to probably go into one of the busiest periods of my career, being in a contract with a company going through this. Now is not the time to sort of be trying to reposition myself or think about IR35 and what that means to my relationship with that company, etc. So, my feeling was it just gives the industry sort of more time to get through something that none of us have ever been through before, ever. So we could just sort of focus at the job in hand as comms professionals and contractors. But of course, we are going to have to face back into it for April 2021, aren't we? So it's not gone away, but I think the delay was a very sensible and reassuring one for the contract market.
Absolutely. A welcome delay in such a hectic time, but something that, contractors and recruiters and hiring managers, businesses really do need to start thinking about. And lots of companies have got plans in place, of course, already, as have contractors. Now, what should contractors, in your opinion, be thinking about in preparation for the IR35 changes in April 2021?
Yeah, and it's something that I'm thinking about a lot myself and considering. So I think the biggest thing, without going into detail, because I myself and a lot of contractors, I still really, I think, and with the support of companies like us, VMA, but still trying to really, really get their heads around exactly what this means to them and the detail of the policy and the guidelines to make the right decisions. The one thing I would say, again, if any future contractors or contractors are listening to this, is what I'm thinking is I've got to be very mindful of conversations I have with companies. So whatever decisions I make about, the details of limited company, umbrella company, etc., aside from that, it's being very clear when you have conversations or you're looking at joining a company on an interim, is to be clear about what the remit is, ways of working, and be extra clear contractually about what that looks like. And I think for me, it's about, if we're clear about that up front, and so you know exactly what you're going into and where you're signing the contract, it's completely correct, it's as per the new guidelines, and you feel very secure in that role. And I think it's a bit of a two-way dialogue, because companies are trying to navigate it too as well. So that's going to be the thing that I think most about really moving forward.
Perfect, thank you. Now, On top of IR35, COVID-19, over the last few years, we've had Brexit, we've had a snap election, we've pretty much had everything we possibly could have to try and impact the economy in one way or another. It has made doing business difficult, in one way or another.
Yeah.
How do you think all of these things and other factors may affect the contracting market? And how do you think it will look in the next few years? Do you think it will dramatically change, or do you think that the need will still be there? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Selfishly, I hope the contracting market remains very, very strong. I think, my belief is that the contracting market will stay very, very strong. I can only talk from the point of view of, communications, change comms, internal comms, and, the world of engagement and for colleagues within organizations. I think that word change, it's what I said earlier, is that there is so much unknown change that all businesses are about to face into. I think what that means is possibly they will be thinking about bringing permanent people on, and what if in a year they're going in a slightly different direction. They're still trying to establish what their business is going to look like in the future. And so I think for that reason, I believe that in the next year or two, definitely, I think communications is going to be an expertise and a discipline that companies really, really need in their business, and interim contractors come in with an expertise, but there's flexibility in that relationship. It's a sort of win-win. And I think longer term, I think with the new world, Brexit and also I think, startup companies, and everything's about transformation and agility in a lot of businesses now, and having to adapt. And I think that contractors will provide expert resource for those companies. So long may contracting be strong and continue.
I couldn't agree more. Very well said, and agreed in many of those points. Well, I just want to thank you really for going for all of that, all of your experience. I think it'd be really, really useful, like I say, for hiring managers, but also for people considering moving into the contracting space. You mentioned, I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned that you've worked with VMA Group. Obviously, we've placed you 2 or 3 times before and hired people for us as well. How would you describe your experience with VMA Group over the years, and how did you first hear about VMA as well?
Yeah, gosh, yeah. So obviously my relationship with VMA has been solid, going since I became a contractor. So I think I mentioned earlier that when I first started thinking about becoming a contractor, one of the first things I needed to do was just to go and understand more about what contracting is and what it means. And so I remember coming to VMA, identifying VMA through my own research as such a specialist recruitment company. And I came in and I actually spoke to your now CEO, Andrew Harvey, and had a very useful and long conversation with him way back when. And then, so when I decided to take the leap, I obviously, signed up with you as a contractor. And then the relationship since then has been really, really strong. I mean, you guys have placed me in a number of my contracts. And I think, God, you would have absolutely opinion on this. It is, as a contractor, it's about building up a reputation and credibility. And I think, that's what I have with VMA now. And for me personally, it's like the relationship with VMA is they know me very well. And I think one of the things from the beginning, one of the reasons you're one of my absolute, main recruiters is because when I'm open to new contract, the match is very, very good. It's like, not only, my professional background, but it's kind of taken the time to kind of get to know me as a character and a person, and what, gets me excited and inspired, and the kind of projects that I enjoy and companies, etc. So I sort of always know that when you put me forward for a role, it's going to be something I'm interested in and a very, very strong fit. And that relationship then progresses and builds up when you do a number of contracts, obviously. So yeah. So again, long may my relationship with of VMA continue.
Absolutely. Thank you for that kind words, and long may that continue. Now, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today in the inaugural VMA Group podcast. There'll be more to come. And it was really, really interesting. I wish you all the best for your last few weeks over at Nespresso. And I hope to definitely work with you again in the future, of course, and place you many more interim contracts.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it has been an absolute pleasure to do the podcast, and I hope it's useful for anyone listening. And yes, I will make the best of the next few weeks, and will obviously be handing over to a wonderful contractor that you have found for Nespresso, which is great. And we'll no doubt be in touch soon. So, but thanks for having me on for the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, and take care. Cheers, Sarah.
Thanks, Matt.